And we'll be making cuts that will be permanent. And we're only going to cut Democrat programs. I hate to tell you. I guess that makes sense. But we're only cutting Democrat programs. But we're going to start that. And we have Russell, we can talk to you about it if he wants to. But we'll be cutting some very popular Democrat programs that aren't popular with Republicans, frankly, because that's the way it works. They wanted to do this. So we'll give them a little taste of their own medicine.
Obamacare was always designed to create single-payer health care. That's what Jan Schakowsky said when she was caught on a hot mic in the town hall 15 years ago.
And those of us who are pushing for a public health insurance option don't disagree with the goal. This is not a principled fight. This is a fight about strategy for getting there, and I believe we will.
That's what conservatives were telling the American people 15 years ago about why we did not support Obamacare.
They're insistent on a single-payer government takeover. The president has said it, Charlie Rangel, Barney Frank, all the Democrat leaders seem to be on record.
The entire time it was going to be government-run health care. That's what they wanted. And so now you have a situation where the Democrats are holding the government hostage because they want us to continue to subsidize their terrible health care policy, which has not worked. It's not affordable. Premiums have doubled since it's been created. Deductibles have more than doubled since it's been created. People are not getting the health care that they need. And furthermore, the way they did this, they wanted young people to go into these pools, but the young people are like, I'm not paying these outrageous premiums just to say I have a health care policy. They'd rather just go to urgent care or find some other means to take care of their health care they think is right, the best way they can. This program has never worked. It's always been more expensive. The Democrats just want more subsidies, and now they're holding the government hostage because of it.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about the Democrats still holding out, thinking that the Republicans are going to fold to their ridiculous demands that they want to be fulfilled before they agree with the Republicans to open back up the government. And anybody with two brain cells to rub together knows that Democrats are responsible for the shutdown, right? And they're doing it mostly to save their own asses, right? Because people like Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, they are targets from the far left, okay? They want to primary Hakeem Jeffries. They want to primary Chuck Schumer. At this point, they've already beaten Schumer, right? If AOC runs against Schumer in the Senate race, he's done. She's going to win, right? She's definitely going to beat Chuck Schumer. So he's done, right? He's cooked. Now, Hakeem Jeffries, again, he's trying to save himself, right? He's the next one on the chopping block. And this is why Democrats are shutting down the government, right? But they want you to think they're fighting for the American people, right? They're fighting to save everybody's health care, including the health care of illegal immigrants, which, again, is really about that, right? More so than the American people. They're just making ridiculous demands. And I think, again, anybody with an IQ above room temperature knows that the Democrats are responsible for the shutdown and that this is something that Democrats would never accept if the roles were reversed, right? Like, this is completely a Democrat thing, right? What we're currently going through right now, which is what Joe Kernen is going to confront Hakeem Jeffries with, which is the reality of the hypocrisy of Democrats on this shutdown. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it.
We're talking about a continuing resolution to keep the government open and then going into the normal appropriations process. I mean, there was an election, and the Republicans were put in a position where they were able to pass the big, beautiful bill, or you call it the big, ugly bill. To then say, we don't like any of that, so we're going to shut down the government until you take back all the things that you duly passed through legislation. If Republicans had tried to do that to the Inflation Reduction Act or the any of the acts that Biden and that administration have passed, if they said we're going to shut down the government because we don't like any of those things you did, we're going to not pay our military, we're going to, not allow the government to reopen until you do what we want. After an election where the American people put Democrats in power, you'd be going crazy. You'd be going crazy about using a shutdown of the government with a continuing resolution to get what you want just because you don't like what the Republicans did. It's not how it works. It's bad. It's bad precedent, and it's just clear. And you're talking about the House. You've already passed this. The Senate is who we're talking about, and they have a bill which will reopen the government right now with 5 more Democrats.
Yeah. So Joe Kernen is spot on. He's 100% spot on. If the roles were reversed, Democrats would be losing their minds. They'd be saying this is an attack on democracy. Republicans are shutting down the government because they didn't like the Inflation Reduction Act, right? And they're begging us. They're saying, hey, we are going to hold the government hostage if you don't repeal parts of legislation that you passed with your majority in Congress, right? Which is what the American people voted for. Democrats would never stand for that, right? They never stand for that. They would be losing their minds. But they're engaged in this, right? They're doing this after they also told us during every other potential government shutdown how terrible it is to shut down the government, right? So terrible, terrible thing, tragic thing. Now all of a sudden they said, no, shutdown is good, right? Shutdown is good because we want the Republicans to undo what the American people voted for. We don't like that the Republicans passed this legislation with their majority, right? I mean, this is 100% legit. Went through Congress. It was done the right way, right? It was done by the rules. The rules. The Democrats said, no, screw democracy, right? Screw it. We're going to shut down the government unless you do what we want, right? Unless you overthrow democracy, we are going to shut down the government. Again, anybody that believes that the Trump administration is at fault, that this shutdown is the responsibility of anybody but the Democrat Party, I don't know what to tell you. You're either a complete and total partisan hack or you're stupid, right? You're really dumb. That's it.
What is bad precedent is the Republican refusal to engage in bipartisan negotiations. What is bad precedent is the Republicans embarking on a my way or the highway approach.
Again, the irony here is that every accusation is a confession, right? It's Democrats that are doing the my way or the highway approach. Democrats, you're the ones who are saying we don't want to continue to have the government open as is, right? You want to bring in issues that literally have nothing to do with keeping the government open. And you're using that, you're holding the government hostage for things that have nothing to do with keeping the government open. They have absolutely nothing to do with that. They can be discussed at a later date, right? At a later time. But again, Democrats accuse the Republicans. Oh, well, see, is their way or the highway, right? For Republicans. And I'm like, this is just disrespectful at this point, right? Like, this type of gaslighting is completely and totally disrespectful. Like, you're disrespecting my intelligence. That's what you're doing. Because I would not go on national television with a straight face and to like lie to the American people and to blame the Republicans for what is clearly a Democrat shutdown by Democrats' own standards that they believed in like before this shutdown, right? Like literally like 12 months ago. And I would respect the Democrats more if they were just honest about what's going on, right? Just be honest. Yes, we're shutting down the government because what we believe in is worth shutting the government down for. I would actually respect that argument. I would disagree because I don't think that healthcare subsidies or essentially forcing the Republicans to repeal their reforms to Medicaid and healthcare in the big, beautiful bill, which would literally cost us $1 trillion, right? We will be spending more money as a result of this. I don't think that that's worth shutting the government down over, right? I think that increasing spending is not worth shutting the government down for, right? To increase spending. But I do think that it is worth shutting the government down to decrease spending, right? To make the government spend less money, right? Because I believe that the debt and the deficit is that big of an issue for this country, right? So the only thing that I would say that justifies shutting down the government is, hey, the government's spending too much money. We need to spend less. We got to shut it down. That makes sense to me, right? And I would have no issues with Republicans shutting down the government if the fight is over spending less, right? If the fight is over, hey, we want to cut spending. We need to cut spending. Yeah, that's worth shutting the government down for, okay? But it's not worth shutting the government down to increase spending. That's not a legitimate reason to do this. But again, my problem is that Democrats are just pretending like they're not the reason why this is happening. When it's like, no, you are the reason why it's happening. If you felt so strongly about your position and what you're fighting for, you don't have to lie and gaslight in regards to why it's happening. You just say, listen, yeah, we're shutting it down, but we're shutting it down because these tax credits are worth fighting for, right? It's really that simple. But no, Democrats take the position, see, we're not responsible for shutting down the government, but we demand that Trump spend $1 trillion more, right? That's essentially what Democrats are doing right now. It's very bad, right? It's very bad politics. But, you know, some people will fall for this.
From the very beginning of this Congress, Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the presidency. Joe, you're exactly right. So if the government shuts down, they've made the decision to shut the government down.
Again, this guy's pretending as if the average American doesn't understand civics, right? Which, again, that's probably what he believes. He's relying on the American people being so dumb. Well, see, you don't understand. Republicans control all of the government, so if the government shuts down, it's on them. But again, the detail is that, well, that's not how Congress or legislation works. He knows this, right? In the Senate, because of the filibuster, which Democrats are using, okay, even though they claim that the filibuster was racist, because of their weaponization of what they claim to be the racist filibuster, unfortunately, Republicans are blocked from passing the continuing resolution to keep the spending as is, right? Something that Democrats agreed to before multiple times in the past, right? Democrats are blocking that with the filibuster. So now there needs to be 60 votes instead of a simple majority in order to pass the legislation, right? He knows this, but he's relying on the listeners to not know this. And this is exactly what I'm talking about when I tell you guys that Democrats depend on the voters being dumb. That's what they depend on. His messaging is formulated around the idea that the American people are stupid and that they don't understand how the government works. That's why I say it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing, and it insults your intelligence to listen to this, because it's like, who wrote your propaganda? Who wrote your propaganda? That person should be fired, right? Because this is not good. This is not good.
And they can reopen it right now if they chose to, with a rule change in the Senate. But I just explained it. The reality is they want to keep the government closed. Cruelty from the very beginning of this administration has been the point. And the responsible thing to do is to sit down and negotiate a bipartisan path forward to address a very real healthcare crisis that's upon us right now. Open enrollment starts on November 1st.
Can you do those negotiations while the government is reopened? I think that's the offer that's been on the table. We did hear the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, talking about how, look, he passed a clean CR. There's not really much for him to politic in because there's nothing to take out. Any Republican pork that they pushed into this to take out of it to offer as a way of getting around this. Can you reopen the government and have these conversations if there's a willing party on the other side, which it sounds like there is if you talk to some of the Republicans who see this as an issue in their district as well?
Well, certainly Marjorie Taylor Greene has made clear that it's a very real issue. It's an issue that Republicans have ignored throughout this year, and it's an issue that needs to be addressed right now. Mike Johnson has made the representation, including at that White House meeting that we had last week, after Chuck Schumer and I reached out to demand that we have the conversation. Unfortunately, it took place literally a day before the government shut down because Republicans have refused to engage in bipartisan negotiations or even conversations up until this point. And our view is, what Johnson said is that health care is an irrelevant extraneous issue. No, it's not an extraneous issue. It's a central issue. And we need to deal with it right now. And we're willing to sit down and have that conversation. We want to reopen the government. But you're not going to fix this. That's a negotiation that is going to take a very long time. Employees, including the military, are not going to get paid on October 15th. Can you have these negotiations? And that's an issue that we believe should. And that's an issue that we believe should be dealt with respect to our troops in a bipartisan way, in a manner that it has been dealt with in the past in previous shutdowns, in the past, including in October of 2013. I'm talking about in October of 2013, where as a standalone issue, the military pay for our families and men and women in uniform was dealt with. That's what I'm making reference to. So who should get paid
besides the military? You think the TSA agents should get paid? Where does the line stop for who gets paid and who doesn't?
The law requires everyone to be paid, and unfortunately, Donald Trump has once again suggested that no one is going to get paid, which to me is consistent with the efforts to undermine the rule of law that we've seen from this administration from the very beginning. Listen,
incredible. The gaslighting is just, wow. This guy is such a robot. It's you can tell, like, his whole thing. Well, no. See, redirect every question. Never answer any question directly, right? Always redirect the question back to Trump. Well, blame Trump, right? And again, it's just like, listen to this guy. It's like, if you're an intelligent person, if you at least understand a little bit of how things work, you just understand how much this guy is. He's just gaslighting, right? Like, for example, he says, well, see, Republicans can do a rule change in the Senate. What he's talking about is that they can basically do a carve out in regards to voting to get rid of the filibuster. So the way to get over the filibuster is to vote to basically get rid of the filibuster, which only requires a simple majority, right? It's funny how that works. Okay, the members of Congress, the senators, put in a filibuster that is supposed to keep legislation from passing, right? But you can overcome the filibuster with a simple majority in order to get rid of it, which again kind of defeats the purpose of having a filibuster. But, you know, again, the filibuster, right, which Democrats are using, yes, Republicans can technically overcome it. However, this will be a very complicated process for them to do. And if they're successful at doing it, it basically creates another carve out where you can't use the filibuster in order to block pieces of, you know, legislation or an agenda being pushed through the Senate. Okay, like, for example, now budget reconciliation, which is how the big beautiful bill was passed, that is not subject to filibuster, which is why that only need a simple majority in order to pass. So basically what Republicans would be doing is that they would be getting rid of the filibuster when it comes to the process of keeping the government open. And in the future, the filibuster would not be able to be used when trying to stop the government from remaining open, right? Or trying to shut down the government. So that in and of itself, again, would set a precedent, again, weakening this filibuster, which is ultimately what Democrats want to do anyways, right? They want to weaken the filibuster. They can point to the Republicans and say, listen, Republicans just weakened the filibuster on this. That means that, hey, we can weaken the filibuster on another issue, right? They want to get rid of it anyways, but they can't just outright do it themselves, right? So again, there's a lot of politics here at play. It's much deeper than what Hakeem Jeffries is letting on. It is a political chess match. And this is why it's so important that Republicans do not fold to the Democrats and their nonsense.
Our position just remains clear. We just want to have a serious bipartisan discussion about reopening the government and enacting a spending agreement that meets the needs of the American people. And we disagree with the notion that the March partisan continuing resolution, which they put before us once again, is actually clean. No, it's not. We opposed it in March because it represented, in our view, an attack on veterans, an attack on nutritional assistance, an attack on women, infants, and children funding, an attack on housing affordability, and an attack on health care. That's not a clean continuing resolution.
Yeah, except that's not what you guys were upset about at the time. You were actually upset because the Trump administration was cutting from the government, cutting these jobs, but that didn't have anything to do with the actual continuing resolution, right? It didn't really have anything to do with that specific piece of legislation. He's, again, conflating things that don't really have anything to do with each other. Again, this is the type of stuff that Democrats engage in
our view. And it was not bipartisan. Certainly that wasn't the case in the House.
But Leader Jeffries, I mean, we know that there are, you know, varying opinions on both sides of the aisle, sharply differing opinions on how to do everything. And you've just outlined a lot of things that Democrats, a lot of problems they have with Republicans. Republicans have a laundry list of things that happened during the Biden administration that they feel the same way about. And I guarantee if they had shut down the government and said, we want a bipartisan talk on doing all this, but what Republicans want, Democrats, their hair would have been on fire. Democrats would have said that's not the way to do it. You can't do it through a government shutdown. And now you're employing that same tactic on what I'm sure you feel are very important issues, but it just looks like, politics as usual to a lot of people.
I think this is very personal for the American people who are at risk of literally experiencing thousands of dollars in a potential increase in their health insurance in a manner that will bankrupt many folks or deprive them of access to health care. We're talking about a married couple of two individuals, for instance, that makes $88,000 a year, currently receives tax credits from the Affordable Care Act and pays about $8,000 a year. Now, this is a situation that's already unaffordable, but their premiums may actually triple to $24,000 a year, unable to afford that. That's
wow. Hakeem Jeffries is admitting that the so-called Affordable Care Act hasn't made healthcare affordable, right? Ain't it funny how that works, right? Ain't it funny how that works? Hakeem Jeffries is admitting that, healthcare isn't really affordable, despite the Affordable Care Act, right? Which again, in the name title, right, you would think it's supposed to make the healthcare system more affordable. It was passed years ago, right? I believe over a decade ago. But it still hasn't made the healthcare system more affordable. That's because the American people, once again, I'm not going to say the American people, I'm going to say lefties, have been bamboozled and hoodwinked into believing that somehow, some way, when a government subsidizes an industry, that prices are going to get cheaper, right? They're going to get cheaper because the government is subsidized. That's typically not how it works, right? You understand why the education system is so inflated, right? Why are costs so inflated? Why do costs continue to rise? Well, because they have an unlimited source of income, the government, right? As long as the government continues to give out student loans, as long as the government gives out these grants, okay, they give out this free money to these universities to send kids to school who should not be going to these universities. As long as they do that, the cost of college is going to continue to go up because colleges can charge whatever. It doesn't matter. They have an endless amount of money from the government. The same thing is what happens with the healthcare system. It's the exact same thing. Why is it that these Obamacare subsidies, which are paid for by taxpayers, they aren't free, right? These subsidies going into the healthcare system have not made the healthcare system more affordable. Because that's not how it works, right? Somebody got to pay for it. Healthcare may be cheaper for some people, but for the people who are not benefiting from the subsidies, you got to pay more, right? This is why when you go to the doctor and you ask, hey, like, what do you charge for uninsured versus insured people? As an insured person, it is likely you're going to be charged more, which means that you're subsidizing an uninsured person, right? So an uninsured person has insurance through insured people who, work, they pay taxes, they buy into their company plan, right? You do it the right way, the way they tell you you're supposed to do it. And what do you get for it? You get higher prices, right? You pay more, okay? And your insurance might cover you. They might cover you if something catastrophic happens. They might cover you. But since you got insurance, you've shown you can pay, right? Therefore, you need to pay for your insurance and you need to pay more. You need to be charged more because you are insured, right? That's the way our healthcare system works. And every subsidy that somebody gets that does not work, that does not produce, that drives up the cost for everybody else, okay? That's what people got to understand. None of this stuff is free. Making it cheaper for one group of people is only going to make it more expensive for everybody else. That's how it works. Now, obviously, there's some people that we should take care of, right? Like the disabled, like the elderly. Yes, we should make sure that they have health care, okay? And that they also have some form of income so that they can live, okay? Yes, we should, okay, take care of them. Even though I do think that Social Security should be privatized moving forward into the future, but that's a whole nother conversation. I'm just saying that, yes, we should have some social safety nets for the people who actually need it, right? But for the people who don't, who can work, who can provide for themselves, the best thing to do is to lower taxes and to cut the subsidies and let the free market be the free market, right? If you allow the free market to be the free market, then prices will come down. But when you have the government distorting the market, what that leads to is higher prices. And it leads to more inefficiencies. And that is the problem with our healthcare system. The leftists want more government when the problem is the fact that there's more government. The answer is having less government. That's the answer. And more transparency. Government where it makes sense, right? Like forcing transparency in pricing among the hospitals, right? That makes sense. Allowing startup hospitals to actually be built, right? Allowing them to be built. Loosening regulations, allowing more doctors to be certified, right? Because right now they limit the amount of licenses they give out per year. Why is that? To control the supply, right? When you control the supply, guess what? You keep the prices for doctors, the salaries for doctors high, right? Artificially high, okay? Because you can limit the supply of them. Again, it's stuff like that that the government should be doing in order to make healthcare more affordable. But, you know, they're doing the exact opposite. They're funding the scam, right? Healthcare is totally a scam. I agree. It is a scam. But part of the reason why it's a scam is because the government is complicit in the scam. They're complicit, just like they're complicit in the scam of higher education. And when people actually understand that, you understand that the real answer is not more subsidies, right? That's not the real answer. That just makes the problem worse.
That's what we're talking about. And this is a very real thing that's happening right now.
We're not going to fix Obamacare or the AC. There's a lot of issues that are not just the expiration of the subsidies that are causing a lot of these problems. And you're not going to be able to fix it and negotiate it between now and reopening the government. You got to reopen the government first and then get.
We made very clear at the beginning.
Yeah, they are more focused on appealing to the far left. Right? They're more focused on saving their own jobs. They don't give a damn about the people. They don't give a damn about the government workers, right? They don't give a damn about them getting paid. They're trying to save themselves. The crazy part about it is that this is not going to work. This is only delaying the inevitable. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.